Today, we are diving deep into one of the wildest, most chilling legends in all of military history, the Philadelphia experiment. This is a story where you've got real World War II science, top-secret projects, and absolutely horrifying eyewitness accounts, all colliding to create this ghost that's been haunting the history books for decades. So let's try and figure out what really happened. Just let that sink in for a second. That one sentence, it really captures the sheer terror at the heart of this legend. See, this isn't just a story about a ship that disappeared. No, it's about a human cost that is almost unimaginable, where the very line between a person and a machine was, well, violently erased. Okay, so picture this. It's 1943. The entire world is at war. The stakes are as high as they can possibly be, and the Allies are desperate, I mean truly desperate, for any kind of edge against the German U-boats that are wreaking havoc in the Atlantic. This is the exact kind of pressure cooker of secrecy and invention where a story like this is born. All right, now we're gonna step into the story itself, the most famous version told just the way the legend has been passed down for generations. So for the next few minutes, just forget everything you think you know. Let's go back to the docks of Philadelphia on one very fateful October morning. So the Navy's supposed secret weapon against the U-boats was a project codenamed Rainbow. And its goal was audacious, to say the least: make an entire naval ship completely invisible to the enemy. They were supposedly drawing on these really radical theories, ideas attributed to geniuses like Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla, and they reportedly took a destroyer, the USS Eldridge, and outfitted it with these massive electromagnetic generators that were designed to literally bend light and radar right around it. The story goes that on that morning, someone flipped a switch. Witnesses on other ships nearby said they heard this bizarre humming sound, and then a thick, glowing green fog started to just swallow the USS Eldridge, completely hiding it from view. And then, in a blinding flash of blue light, it was just gone. Not invisible on a radar screen, it had vanished from physical space. The water where a 1,000-ton destroyer was floating just seconds before, completely empty. And this is where the story gets even weirder. For just a few minutes, the USS Eldridge was supposedly spotted hundreds of miles away at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia. Then it dematerialized again and reappeared right back in Philadelphia as that creepy green fog slowly faded. The experiment, it had worked. But something had gone horribly, horribly wrong. Because, as the legend claims, the crew paid a terrifying price for this supposed breakthrough. Some sailors were found literally embedded in the steel bulkheads, their bodies merged with the ship's metal. The ones who survived were driven completely insane. And others, well, they reportedly suffered from something called the freeze, where they would just phase in and out of existence, randomly, without any warning. You know, for years, this whole thing was just a rumor, right? A ghost story that sailors would tell each other. But then, in the 1950s, it just exploded back into the public eye. And it's all thanks to two very different and very mysterious men. Let's take a look at how this legend got a second life.
So, on one side, you have Morris K. Jessup. He was an astronomer who had become a pretty well-known UFO investigator. And on the other side, you've got this guy named Carl Allen, who used the name Carlos Allende. And Allen, he was the one who was about to pour gasoline on this fire.
So in 1955, Allen starts writing these really bizarre letters to Jessup. He claims he was a sailor on a ship nearby, the SS Andrew Forsyth, and that he saw the whole thing happen with his own two eyes. He started talking about unified field theory and bridging dimensions, and he was adamant that the Navy had accidentally torn a hole in the fabric of reality. Then the whole thing took an even stranger turn. A copy of Jessup's own book was mailed anonymously to the Office of Naval Research, and the margins were filled with these rambling, handwritten notes from what looked like 3 different people, all discussing the experiment as if it were a known fact. The notes were so strange, the Navy was actually intrigued enough to contact Jessup about it. Jessup got completely obsessed with this. He was telling friends he was on the verge of a huge breakthrough, that he was about to find definitive proof. And then, he was found dead in his car. Now, the official ruling was suicide, but of course, conspiracy theorists are convinced he was silenced, killed right before he could expose the government's darkest secret. So that's the legend. A teleporting ghost ship, a shadowy government cover-up, a dead investigator. It's a heck of a story. But what if the real truth is less supernatural, but in its own way just as interesting? Let's take a look at what was really going on in that Philadelphia shipyard during the war. Okay, the key to understanding all of this might be a real, and at the time, very secret technology called degaussing. The goal wasn't to make a ship invisible to the eye, it was to make it invisible to German magnetic mines and torpedoes, which were absolutely devastating Allied shipping. And when you hear how this degaussing process worked, you can totally see how this crazy legend could have started. First, they'd wrap the ship's entire hull in these massive electrical cables. Then they'd blast a powerful current through them, which would cancel out the ship's magnetic field. Now imagine you're an observer on another ship. You see a destroyer shrouded in wires, humming with electricity, maybe even a strange glow coming off of it. It would have looked like something straight out of science fiction. So let's break it down side by side. The invisibility field was most likely just the strange visual effect of degaussing. Magnetic invisibility, not visual. Those horrifying stories of men fused to the ship? Well, researchers think that was probably a sailor's tall tale inspired by another experimental ship, the USS Timmerman, which had these high-frequency generators known to cause terrifying electrical arcs. And the teleportation? Well, official ship logs show the USS Eldridge was actually in the Bahamas when the experiment supposedly took place. So, case closed, right? Just a simple misunderstanding of some secret tech blown way out of proportion by one eccentric guy. Probably. But there's one piece of this puzzle that just doesn't quite fit right. And this is the question that keeps the whole conspiracy alive. Why would the ONR, a serious military intelligence agency, go to the trouble of reprinting Jessup's book, complete with Allen's bizarre handwritten notes? Why give the ramblings of this one guy any official attention at all? It doesn't quite add up. This leads to a final and pretty unsettling theory. What if the experiment wasn't about the ship's hardware at all? What if it was about the crew's mental software? Maybe the real Project Rainbow was a psychological operation, an experiment to see how people, from sailors on the docks to intelligence officers, would react to a story that completely defied logic. The physical ship, the USS Eldridge, was eventually sold to Greece and later scrapped. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. But the story, the ghost of that ship, that is more powerful than ever. It has survived for over 80 years. And that might be the real takeaway here. The Philadelphia experiment shows us that our desire to believe in the mysterious and the impossible is incredibly powerful. It proves that if you get the right mix of government secrecy, strange visuals, and a really compelling story, our own minds will happily do the rest of the work. Ultimately, the legend of the USS Eldridge forces us to ask a question not about naval technology, but about us. In a world where we never have all the information, what is it that makes one story feel true while another feels like just a story? And what does our choice say about us?